Description of what blockchain is?
It's a distributed ledger.
Awesome, okay. Good start. Okay, well, thank you all, especially the panelists and all of you guys for being here. Let's start off. Let me grab some questions. Just to begin with, we'll go with a few intros. I'm just gonna let you guys do your own intros. Oh, and about the pizza, once it comes, we'll take a little bit of a break, let you all grab some pizza and drinks, and then we'll kind of regroup over here. Let's start off with the intro, just a little bit about what you do, and what you do in blockchain itself, and how you learned about it, because it's pretty new, and you know, a lot of people out here probably want to learn a little bit more, so if you can tell them how you learned it, it might help them as well. So
okay, awesome. I guess I'll start first. Hey everyone, my name is Justin Whoo. I am a growth marketer in the token space, and I have helped over 8 token sales so far on building a community, brand, and then taking a look at now like security tokens, which is coming out as well, and then also non-blockchain projects. I've been in projects like Unicorn Gold, which is a Mark Cuban esports backed token, ShipChain, which is logistics on the blockchain, backed by Kevin Harrington. Another one's called TrueBit, which is a Ethereum scaling project, and a lot of other projects kind of in different spaces as well. And kind of like how I got into the blockchain, or just like crypto blockchain space in general, was back in 2012-13 during the Dogecoin days. I was a big gamer, so I actually had a good big graphics card, and I was actually mining from my computer. And then that's when I really started getting into crypto, started building a lot of rigs. Then when Bitcoin went to 1,000 and crashed and Mt. Gox happened, I got burned so bad that I didn't want to look at crypto back until probably around early 2017 when I started looking at Ethereum and smart contracts. And I said, hey, this is kind of like the second coming again. But if I want to see if this is for real or not, the best way for me to really know about that is to really just jump into the business side and the forefront in working in the blockchain space. So then that's when I really started working alongside with essentially the forefront of blockchain companies to see if it's real or not. That's the fastest answer that I can get from it, and just kind of like network my way into that. So the way that I've learned, again, is through just getting my hands experience in the field, and then also too, just asking a lot of questions. Like if you hear things like somebody says, what's DLT, distributed ledger technologies, then just go ask that question and go research it. What's security tokens? What's ICOs, etc. So it was been me like just studying every day and just asking the right questions and connecting myself with a lot of people.
Definitely.
Awesome.
My name's Shawn Ray. I've been in blockchain for about 1.5 years. I got in because I bought Bitcoin when it was under $1,000. I just bought one, unfortunately, and it was with the intention of just seeing what the protocol does. And I held on to it, and then I switched to altcoins eventually. Very early on, I realized that the real story was the blockchain, the technology underlying Bitcoin. So I started researching the technology underlying it, and I went down this rabbit hole. I'm from Toronto, so there's a huge blockchain community there. Everyone's really helpful. The community is small, but you can find a lot of data online. YouTube's your best bet, Twitter, and you can really reach out to people developing new algorithms, new mechanisms, consensus protocols, and you can just ask them what it means, and they do get back to you, and they give you an in-depth explanation of what it is usually. A lot of companies that are doing ICOs, they're very forthcoming with their information, and they're ready to explain what their technology does. So that's also a great source of learning. I have a background in economics and an MBA in finance, so I'm not a tech person. But it was fairly easy to understand. It took me about 6 months to really get the hang of it, but I feel pretty confident now. Working on a startup currently. It's a project management startup for construction and engineering projects, larger projects, which has a lot of people involved who don't necessarily know or trust each other. There's a fintech angle, there's a smart contracts and legal angle, and there's an auditability angle. And I do a lot of consulting and educating people on what blockchain is as well.
Cool. My name is Jaeho Sheem, and I'm the community manager for CrowdCreate. We work in ICO servicing. So we apply a lot of growth hack techniques and stuff like that. I've worked on projects like Boss ID, which is a fragmented identification protection on the blockchain. I've worked for Lending Block, which is like a lending and securities token. And yeah, the way I got into blockchain was during 2012, 2013, when Silk Road was like the big thing, and everybody was speculating what Bitcoin was and if it was used to buy drugs and guns and stuff. So obviously I had to go check it out. And didn't really buy into it too much until 2017, early 2017. My friend was like, let's make some money, let's start investing into this thing. And I had no idea how to work stocks. Like I had no idea of any of that. So I just said, well, let's try it out here. And yeah, here I am. Made a little bit of money, lost a huge amount of money, invested in high yield investment portfolios, and I got burned on that. So yeah, but it's a lot of fun.
Hi guys, my name is Tatiana Kaufman. Is this working? Yeah. I am not a tech person, I am a finance geek who kind of ended up in tech. So my background is I have a JD MBA, started my career in investment banking, ended up working on a major trading floor, doing swaps, derivatives, asset-backed securities, currencies, then ended up on vacation in LA and sort of fell into a job running a venture capital fund for Linkin Park, the rock band, and that was my foray into consumer technology. And so through that, I invested in Lyft, Robinhood, Blue Bottle, Hyperloop, Riot Games, and got obsessed with technology. Went on, became a founder of my own consumer tech company, which was in the travel space, which is currently going through an exit. And then in the fall, I kind of just by accident fell into this crypto rabbit hole. A lot of my friends started to get into the space and they were trading, and I started looking at how they were trading the altcoins. I was like, oh, this kind of reminds me of what I used to do a few years ago. And I started playing around with it, and the part that I got really fascinated by is the fact that we could essentially wipe out fiat and create a new world order in terms of currencies and how we trade. And that's the part I got really, really passionate about. And so 3 months ago, I was asked to join Brock Pierce's fund, DNA, as a venture partner, and I've been absolutely loving it. Just came back from Puerto Rico. If anyone was there, it was an absolutely great time. And so I source deals or run deals across industries. We focus on both utility and security tokens. I'm happy to chat with anyone in more detail if anyone's more interested in what the fund does.
Awesome, thank you. I'll also just give a little intro about myself. I'm Manju Mohan. I'm the CEO of Ionix Technologies. We're a development firm. We mainly focus on developing mobile and web technologies and also blockchain-based applications. So we got into this space about almost a year ago. We're working on a few different use cases, developing the full life cycle of a blockchain app, starting from the design to the back end, which is the blockchain part, and the front end as well. So it's like it's a fully functioning app. So we should be done with a couple of prototypes by end of April or so. So that's a little bit about myself. And where I learned about blockchain, a lot of it through online searches and learning. And actually, Shaan was one of my teachers in this space as well. So if you have any good questions about the technology itself, he's a good person to ask. And Justin's been educating me more on the ICO side as well. So yeah, you got a great panel here. So sorry guys. Yeah. So got a great panel here. A lot of questions that you could get answered today. So let's start off with a couple of questions for the panel. I'll start with you, Shaan, just as the educator here in blockchain. Maybe you can start off by giving us just a brief. That was a great description there about what blockchain is, but a little bit more into detail on what the underlying technology itself is. So I think a lot of people know.
Okay. Can you guys hear us? Okay.
Can you hear
there's
us?
Some music playing in the next door. Yeah, I don't think it's.
Oh, is that better? Hello?
And the rest of us are good? Yeah?
Rest of you are good? Okay, I'll also try to speak up a little better more. I just didn't want to be too loud, but okay. So Shaan, can you give us a little bit of a description of the underlying technology? A lot of people here know probably about the crypto side, like the Bitcoin and that side of it, but what's the technology underlying all of this crypto?
Right, so the innovation is that it's a new way to organize your data. It's a database. It's organized into blocks, and the blocks are chronologically ordered, and they're linked together by what's called a hashing mechanism. What's great about it is that it's immutable, so once data goes into the blockchain, you can't go back and change it. If I give you a Bitcoin, it has to reference to the transaction where I purchased the Bitcoin. And for non-Bitcoin transactions, the blockchain gives you an immutable database where you're able to reference people's data, you're able to audit the system very fast, and you know for a fact that it hasn't been changed or tampered with since the data was entered into the blockchain to begin with. So it opens up a range of use cases for all kinds, for different industries and different level of transactions. It really empowers you to create transactions that were not possible before in a trustless environment.
Cool, that was a good description. We can follow up with other questions later on if you have any more further to that description. Tatiana, just as someone who's been investing in this space, do you have a couple of use cases that you could talk about, maybe two of your favorite use cases that you've seen, how people are using blockchain technology to develop applications out there?
Sure, I'm going to do a shameless plug for a deal I'm currently running at DNA. It's called Spring Roll, roll as in job role, and it's actually disrupting LinkedIn on the blockchain. So on LinkedIn, you kind of go in and you put whatever name you want, whatever school you went to, whatever job you had, and no one can really verify any of that. And then you can call a bunch of your friends and have them give you recommendations. And so that actually makes the recruiting process very difficult and very costly because a lot of the wrong candidates get hired because they embellish their job credentials. And so what SpringRoll did is essentially created a protocol to store all of that data. So they're pulling data from the universities directly and recording it into the blockchain, and then it cannot be changed. They're pulling data from employers directly and again putting it into the blockchain. And then for peer-to-peer attestation, they actually created a proof of stake model where you can stake a small amount of your Spring tokens. So say I want to say, Justin's very experienced in building blockchain products, and I'm going to stake 5 Spring tokens and say that that is true. Then Justin gets a job, and I get a return on my investment, and I get 50 tokens back. So it's a way to invest in your social network and create a trust system. So I think that's a really cool project. I think we're going to see a lot of stuff in healthcare. Data storage in healthcare is a total mess, and if someone can figure out and solve that problem so that no matter where I'm in the world, I have access to my healthcare data, and if I get into an accident, I have access to my health history. I think that would be really useful. I think music licensing has some interesting applications. If you can actually store patterns of notes in blocks, then plagiarism of music essentially disappears. And sampling becomes a lot easier, and you can actually track payments for sampling. So there's across really all industries, there's amazing applications. In banking, settlement and clearance, I don't know if anyone's ever worked on the trading floor, that you actually have a paper trail for like the stocks and bonds that you trade even in this day and age. So it goes through a middle office and then it goes through a back office. And in settlement and clearing, so a lot of banks like Goldman Sachs are actually building private blockchains so that the data can move much quicker and be stored, and once it's verified by multiple parties, it's locked in and it's immutable and it's verified and it's in there. So I mean, the list is endless.
Thank you. Yeah, there's just so many really great use cases out there. One of the questions that I have for you, Justin, you talked about tokenization. That's one of the things that you do at CoinCircle. Could you explain, so you mentioned some really great use cases and how they're using the tokens to kind of make the whole process work in these businesses. could you explain a little bit about how that process of tokenization works? What is it really to tokenize something?
Yeah, so like one of the biggest use case that I always think for tokens has a real application has been for gaming, esports, and so like Unicoin Gold was a easy an example to work with, and also too, what Unicoin Gold did is they created essentially a online esports betting platform, and so that in itself has a lot of regulations, especially when you're dealing with gambling with fiat, and so for them they had probably like hundreds of millions in revenue already as is, but it wasn't as open into the market, and so for us to create a token in that layer for them to kind of create this token that is utilized for betting, help them in terms of like expanding their network, and also then allows them to go beyond not just rewarding betting, but build essentially a token that can be utilized for digital assets, trading, skins, or for video games. And so when it comes to like tokenization, I mean, it really depends on what utility use case that token or project has. And like I think video games is probably like the building a credit system, or even like another project working on is building loyalty rewards system too. That's like another like example use case besides the ones that she listed out there.
Could you also explain a little bit about ICOs? Like what is an ICO?
Yeah. So ICOs, initial coin offerings, is when essentially a token needs to go out and start. They need to go out and essentially build a user base, a community, to get it out to the hands of people actually utilizing. Hopefully they have a use case for the token. And so a lot of these ICOs they're hearing, they're utilizing it as a funding mechanism to fund their business, but hopefully they're building essentially a bigger project or protocol for the betterment of their industry. So that's why you're seeing a lot of ICOs happening in different industries, from supply chain to fintech to real estate. Everybody's trying to solve different pockets or create a token usage for that industry, so that different players can come in and trade their tokens, or essentially reward people for those usage too. So that whole process is similar to like the fundraising, especially now. Since a lot of the regulations is kicking in, a lot of these ICOs used to sell it to the public, to everybody around here. I've seen that just completely closed up. Nobody wants to really do a public sale anymore. They want to go just sell to accredited investors or institutions and VCs. So it's kind of going back to the old school VC fundraising model. And then when they go finish that raise, they'll go out and give out tokens in a mass, what they call an airdrop, where they just give tokens away for free, kind of like a trial. And that's where they start bringing out more users to their Telegram channels, and essentially get it out to the hands of many people, because only maybe like a couple hundred people participated in the private and pre-sale rounds. So.
Next question's for Jaeho. So you work on promoting a lot of these ICOs.
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit about while you're promoting an ICO, do you talk about the technology underlying it? Do you talk about how the tokens are going to be used? Like, what do you promote exactly?
So before I even pick up a project, I look at their platform first. What they have out. Do they have an app out that I can already test out? Is it something that I can already make money off of? That's a very huge part for me. And when we actually market these ICOs, that's what we like to focus on. We like to focus on the usage of it. I actually don't really care about the value. I don't care how much money it's going to make me. What I care about is, how is this going to change my life? Is this something that I'm going to be using every single day? And yeah, so that's a very big part of it for me. If people are going to buy this token and they're going to trust my betting on it, I need that token. I need that platform to be working.
Cool, thank you.
Can I chime in here for a second?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So what you're saying is really interesting, and it's actually really interesting from a regulatory perspective.
Okay.
If I can shift this over for a second.
Yeah.
So in the most recent test that came out, the Munchie test in December, one of the prongs of the test essentially said, who are you marketing and advertising this ICO to? And so if you're a utility token, what you should be doing is marketing and advertising it to users who are actually going to derive utility from the platform, versus if you're marketing and advertising it to institutional investors and crypto whales and crypto funds, then you're really selling a security because you're selling something with the expectation of profit. So I think inadvertently what you've been doing is actually the right thing to be doing.
I think that, yeah, we're kind of in like a little gray area where when we talk to these VCs, and Justin's absolutely right, we've been watching a shift from just ICO to private sales and pre-sales, and even just reaching out to only VCs. This has been a huge thing. So when we go to these VCs and when we go to these pre-sale investors, we're actually marketing in a different way. We're marketing as a security, as you're going to be able to make some money off of this.
Yeah.
But during the main sales, we actually talk about the platform utility. And when we're marketing to the global scale, on an international scale, we're going to be using the platform marketing techniques as opposed to the security techniques.
Just a super quick question on that. So these are the same tokens you're selling to the investors as a security, and you're selling the same tokens to like people as a utility? These are the same tokens?
So right, yeah, and it's not really, I don't want to pinpoint and say we sell it as a security. It's more, it's kind of like how we pitch it to these investors, because people care about different things. Investors and the people that are actually building the platform care about how many people can I get into my Telegram group, how many people know about my platform. As opposed to users care about how can this change my life in a real life application.
So is it better to market to the users first to add value to it and then market it to the industry?
I would actually say the reverse, because these people need to eat. Like, a lot of these developers are not gigantic teams. Those are only a handful of the ICOs that are coming out. A majority of the teams that I'm finding are actually small scale. It's their big dream to launch this technology and maybe make some money off of it. So we need to be able to have these guys eat. We need to have these guys live somewhere, while they develop. And that's what the pre-sale and the private sales, the outreach to VCs, that's what that is essentially for.
That's what it's supposed to be for.
Right.
I'm seeing more and more deals that are actually skipping main sale, which is very problematic, because if you look at tokenomics and you look at token velocity and what actually makes the token not crash in value, it's the fact that people are holding it and they're actually using it, and investors have no reason to hold or use the token. Their impetus is to essentially sell off the token the second it goes live, and that's what crashes projects. And so I think it's actually really important to just maybe do the smallest pre-sale you can to feed your team and grow your product, and then put out a beta, market it as wide as possible, get usership, get adoption, and do a crowd sale, because that is actually the point of what we're trying to create. We're trying to decentralize products and distribute ownership. And I'm seeing more and more of these ICOs, and we're also at fault for this, what I do for a living, but I'm trying to encourage more and more of my companies to actually not skip the main sale, because it's dangerous for what they're trying to build.
Right.
From a utility perspective. Security tokens, different story, but utility tokens, it can completely crash your token.
I agree with that.
And just one point to that too, the issue with a lot of the ICOs is they don't even have a working MVP or product, or they're a startup that didn't raise a startup fundraising round and they never had users to begin with. So that's like another big issue. And that, for me, working with a lot of ICOs and tokens and just seeing other ones out there, the biggest issue is that, they raised 30 million. They have to first try to build a product, and then they go back to the typical startup issue which they had to begin with, which was user acquisition, which they don't have a clue about too. So there's a lot of big, what's coming now is you're seeing a lot more potential big brands like Ubisoft looking at blockchain, Atari, some actual bigger use cases or real user bases come in. They haven't fully kicked in yet, but I think we'll start seeing a little bit more mature companies enter the space, and then they'll bring the brand name, the users, and the real utility and deploy that fast. So the hope is that everybody, or the tokens out there, do build a real utility use case, but that's not always the reality.
Right, there's I think 3,000, 4,000 projects coming out every single month.
Yeah.
I get approached by hundreds of projects every day, and most of them, I think 99% of them, don't have an application working. They have nothing up. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's an issue.
It is an issue.
Yeah, and if I can just add for a second, that is insane that we're seeing essentially pre-seed rounds in the $30 million range,
Right,
because
yeah,
that is
that's-
essentially what's happening.
Yeah.
You should go out, you should raise a friends and family round, you should raise a pre-seed, maybe a seed, and then when you have a product and you need to tokenize that product, you go out and you ICO for $30 million. And so much of what we're seeing is people are seeing this as a quick raise, which is why regulators, like SEC is fighting back, because it's a slap in the face right now. It's very obvious that people are going out and grabbing money in very illegitimate ways instead of putting that in towards building real products.
Right.
So if you're thinking of starting a company, go raise a pre-seed or a friends and family round, build something, and then come to us and try to ICO.
In fact, I get a lot of people who come to me to get their blockchain-based app built, and a lot of times it doesn't even make sense to have this on the blockchain. But they're just like, oh, like, here's this thing I want to do. Basically, they're looking to raise money using the blockchain, and they don't really have a blockchain use case, but they're trying to really desperately to find one. In fact, one of did you want to chime in?
Yeah, what did they say on John Oliver? Long Island blockchain iced tea, and their valuation like spiked.
Exactly,
It's
doesn't
crazy.
make sense. So I mean, one of my questions, actually, I was going to address it to Shaan, but everyone please feel free to chime in. And after this question, we'll probably take a pause, pick up some pizza, come back in, and we'll do some questions from the audience. But when and why do you tell somebody to go in to use blockchain technology versus any other technology that's out there?
Right, so think about the transactions you're trying to enable. The second you have transactions, you can use blockchain technology to make it faster, cheaper, more efficient. So if we take gaming as an example, you want to record a person's history in the game, you want to record the transactions they've conducted within the game, the relationships that person has with other people within the game. So that could use a blockchain as a database. But if it's just a single player HTML5 in the browser kind of a game, you don't really need a blockchain there. It's just a single person playing with no record, just for fun. So it really depends on the use cases that you want to allow in your applications. Also, I just want to make a small point that not all of your program is going to be built on the blockchain. Only a certain aspect, so 20% or 30% of it is going to be on the blockchain, the data part of it. The rest of it is going to be HTML5, CSS, user interface, middleware. So you have to think about the transactions that your technology involves, as well as the percentage of your applications which actually going to interact with the blockchain part of it.
Cool. So let's take a little break. I see that some people have already grabbed pizza quietly. That's great. But if everyone could, we'll take a break to grab some food. And in the meanwhile, I feel like the audience is itching to ask a few questions to this awesome panel that we have. So I'll open it up to the audience now.
So, Shaan,
There we go.
I know there's a lot of developers here, as some of you mentioned, in smaller teams. 2, 3, 4, 5 people developing these platforms. And it's good you touch upon trying to test it a little bit first before going and raising all this money. As an attorney who does a lot of these transactions with investors, raising money, filling the contracts, I think there's a big gap in terms of where developers from one side see their platform going, what the ambitions they have, and the reality of whether it's needed or not, right? What would be some tips you can give some of these developers here to approach? And maybe you guys touched upon this a little bit, but practical advice that they can take in the next, let's say, 1 month as they're going about their day, spending hours and hours. So touch upon that a little bit.
In terms of, so you mean in terms of the legal aspect of it,
But
or?
they're, from an organizational point,
Right.
as they're developing the softwares, where do they focus their energy on? The development side, pitching, making connections, testing it.
Right, I would say definitely the development side, as well as thinking about user acquisition, alliances or strategic relationships with other blockchain projects, and seeing if the project is getting traction by itself. You could build the greatest technology, but if you have no users, It doesn't matter if there's blockchain or there isn't, or any of the other stuff.
So in other words, phase by phase.
Right.
As opposed to jumping
It'll
into
take
the
a
whole
holistic
thing.
approach, I would say.
Okay, that's very good advice. Anybody else have questions here? We have Emil.
This is for Shaan. You said something that got. I don't think it makes any difference.
Yeah, that microphone's not really working.
Okay, could we have everyone kind of settle in again? Hey everyone, if we could just settle in a little bit. We'll have some time to network a little bit later too, but just if we could get the questions in and we can all hear it.
I can't usually eat while I work.
No pizza?
I'm just like,
Yeah, I'll get some
focus
after.
on
I'm good for now.
compartmentalize my
I had some pizza earlier. Yeah.
So, Shaan, you can hear me fine. Okay, so you said blockchain is a database that's faster.
Right.
And that seems counterintuitive to me because if I'm designing something with a database and I have one server I'm hitting, you're hitting thousands of servers or hundreds of servers. How is it faster?
Right. So transactions, I meant transactions are faster, and verifying transactions or auditing transactions are faster. So let's say you have an organization and you have a private blockchain, and I want to conduct a transaction with someone in a certain department. As of today, there are permissions assigned to transactions. So if I want to conduct a transaction, I approach a person and I say, this is my request. The person goes through a checklist and they say yes or no. But if you could do all of that programmatically, and it's on the blockchain and it's mutable ledger that everyone can audit later on, that increases the speed of those transactions. So if you look at a larger organization like ExxonMobil, which has offices in 100 different countries with various levels of hierarchy, you could transact with someone within the organization based on a set of rules, and it could be immediate as opposed
So
to...
you're not talking about the speed of the database. You're really talking about the speed of the process.
Right. So
That's a different point.
Right. The speed of the database, there's a lot of projects that are coming up now which have a lot of scale built into them. The Bitcoin blockchain is very slow. Transactions are very slow on that blockchain. Scalability has been one of the main issues in this industry, and there are several projects that are working to address that.
I think Bitcoin actually just implemented the Lightning Network about 2-3 months ago.
Right.
So even the Bitcoin network is working on it. They understand that it's a problem.
Right.
I don't want to hog it, but I have another question for Tatiana.
Sure.
Okay, so Tatiana, you raised a very interesting point about creating a company that's competitive to LinkedIn. And the whole thing about blockchain is that it's completely verifiable. And the whole thing about people looking for jobs is that they can sometimes create gray areas. And that has an actual benefit, which is it lubricates the process of people finding places. So sometimes a guy who didn't go to Harvard, but might pump up his resume, turn out to be a better candidate than the guy who went to Harvard.
More often than somebody who lies on their resume is not a good hire.
No, it's not lying. It's essentially, in all human relationships, there's a certain uncertainty that makes them possible. If you are in an intimate relationship in marriage, you know that you have to, it's not black and white.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to have like a human
I'm just raising the point that in the relationship between employer and a candidate, there's also that kind of a gray area that makes it function, and your approach essentially challenges that.
Yeah, if I can answer that. So networking your way into jobs and impressing people in person is never going to go away. People pulling favors for other people and nepotism is never going to go away. That subjective hiring will always exist. What we're talking about here is a global economy. So actually the history of the company, of how it got started, the original business was recruiting engineers from India for American startups because we have a known shortage of engineering talent here, right? And so that's a very defined, skilled labor where you can say someone has 3 years of Java experience and they've worked on A, B, and C, right? And if you can actually verify that type of experience, that candidate now has a stronger chance of getting hired. So you're actually creating a global economy and bringing down borders, and you're doing all of that through little things like parsing resumes and getting verifications, both peer-to-peer and previous employer. And as someone who ran a tech startup, I can tell you that finding outsourced labor, it's insanely difficult because there's so much crap out there, right? And if I had a tool like this that actually told me what engineers, using engineers as an example, this can also be applied to other skilled laborers, what engineers out there are good on the other side of the world, I'd be hiring more of them, right? So this actually opens up a borderless economy. So as for freelancers, for example, I can be anywhere in the world. I could be traveling full time, and I can have a verified resume, and it's easier for me to get work, right? Across industries. Please go ahead.
I also want to point out that we've already tried to do things like this. Upwork is a great example. These are already things that we've attempted and we've tried to do. Blockchain just makes it much more transparent and streamlined.
Yeah. Another one of our portfolio companies is called WorkCoin, and that is Upwork.
Yeah.
So the two are actually working in partnership. Future of work is going to be huge. There's several companies coming in the HR recruitment area for blockchain.
If anyone has questions, just raise your hand. I'll come around to you.
Before I ask my question on the Upwork question or point that you made, are you saying that Upwork's on the blockchain, or one of their sister companies is going to be on the blockchain? Can you
We have another company in our portfolio. It's not my deal. It's a colleague's deal. It's called WorkCoin.
WorkCoin.
Yeah.
Okay.
WorkCoin, and that is Upwork on the blockchain.
Okay.
And the two companies, Springroll and WorkCoin, have just actually announced a partnership where
Gotcha.
Springroll will be handling the profiles and the attestations, and WorkCoin will be handling the flow of freelance kind of work available out there, and you will be logging in with your Springroll profile so that you
Gotcha.
can get flow of work through WorkCoin.
Nice. Okay.
So we'll see a lot of collaboration in the space. One of the things that I love about the space is it's not competitive, it's collaborative. We don't believe in patents. Whenever someone comes into our office and says, sign an NDA or I have a patent for this, we show them the door. We believe in open source. We believe in creating a new world and a new world order. And you know, all of our companies that we take on, we encourage them to forge partnerships versus compete with each other.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. My actual question's a technical one. On the smart contract space, which I think you spoke of when you and probably you all know about it, but where does the data get stored? I understand that there's the blockchain keeps track of the transactions and whatnot, but with especially the smart contracts, there's a lot of data behind it. So I'm in the mining space. I help set up mining and hosting for people who want to do that, and I get the mining part, but I don't really get where the data is going to go. So can you help me with that?
So a lot of the data in the smart contract is programmed within the smart contract itself. And then the user-generated data, which is not part of the smart contract, it's usually sent to the smart contract when they're initiating a transaction. And then the data is actually hashed and kept on a parallel database, and the hash is saved on the blockchain. So it really depends on the type of the blockchain that is being used. Ethereum does it a certain way. There's a lot of new protocols that are in the works right now that are doing it a completely separate way.
So Ethereum, just take that example.
Right.
It's kind of popular. So a hash of the data gets stored in the actual blockchain database. The rest is
right. So it depends on if you're running a full node or just a client, a regular client. A full node has all of the data stored on it, and as well as the hashes, as well as the blockchain.
that could get.
It gets really heavy. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So how many people are hosting them? How distributed is that?
I'm not sure how distributed Ethereum is, but I know that there are obviously several more lighter clients than full blockchain nodes. But as a miner, you would have the entire blockchain saved with the data. Because when anyone wants to verify that the data is there and they go down the Merkle tree, they're going to be querying someone's database. And as a miner, you're probably going to be one of the databases that should be available.
I have a more elementary question that I'm sure you know, but in terms of mining, what does that mean? Because I think, Justin, you were saying that you were mining from your computer because your computer had the capacity to do it. So are you running like a server on your computer? That's
Shaan could probably talk a little bit more, but it was the graphics card, the GPU that was doing the mining, and then people were actually, or processors. Like there was 2 coins. One was the ASIC coins, which is what Bitcoin is, and I guess that's with processing power. And then the GPUs, or the graphics card, GPU mining was with script mining, script-based coins. And I think it has to do with is it the hash algorithm? It has to do with the algorithm. And basically what these processors are doing is like solving math problems and finding the answers, and then that's when you get rewarded the blocks, which generate the coins. And so when you see these graphics cards just running 24/7, they're just running math problems. That's kind of switches.
So you're agreeing to use your GPU as a processor, but is it, like, how do you agree to that? Do you just have like an application that
You're contributing your computing power to solve certain hashing algorithms. Mining also only happens in proof of work type of currencies, which is Bitcoin, Litecoin, and a bunch of others. But the trend is kind of moving away from mining. It's moving to proof of stake. So there's a lot of currencies which are testing out proof of stake. Proof of stake means that you stake your money to confirm that the transactions are correct. Proof of work means you participate in the network by actually working through the hashing algorithms to prove that the transactions are correct. To be honest, I looked at mining. If you want to mine right now, you could download this thing called MinerGate and run it on your Mac. You could mine a bunch of coins on it. Bitcoin mining as a business, unless you're doing it institutionally, it doesn't really make sense. There's more money right now in selling mining equipment than actually mining. So as a miner, I wouldn't really, unless you're getting into it big time, I wouldn't really recommend it. Also, the trend seems to be moving away from mining.
There's a reason why mining corporations are not in the States. There's not a lot of them. There's not a huge amount of them in the States. And it's electricity. Electricity is incredibly expensive. So the money you're getting from mining, you're probably going to lose that electricity. And yeah, we're also seeing a lot of tokens moving away from even being able to be mined. So Lending Block, my project, LND is not mineable. And they want to keep it at a certain cap, which holds the value of their tokens. Or that's the philosophy behind it.
So does it make sense because you're saying that in the US there's not a lot of miners because of the cost of electricity. So there is a lot of international mining happening right now.
So
yes.
It's more lucrative.
Yeah, or like Canada, there are mining facilities in the States in pretty remote locations.
Yeah.
From my run-ins, mining is pretty centralized. These are $1 billion plus operations. They've been mining since 2012. Some of them have been doing it in very creative ways by acquiring 49% of other mining groups, so they're not 100% ownership. And some of them are creating crazy MLM contract structures to just like massively like fuel their mining. Like these are people who are buying all the inventories, buying all the GPUs by like multiple truckloads, and I've seen some of them too. And so if you want to get into mining, it's very, very competitive. And so that's what's also, I think it's what's kind of suppressing some of the price is that there's been a huge spike in like mining equipment and mining power in the past like 6 months or even a year. And so it's actually more, I think right now it's like $6,000, potentially up to $6,000 to mine a Bitcoin. I think if you don't have like kind of just like average electricity.
Right.
Those people don't really care though because they've already been mining for so long. They already have $1 billion, and they're just going to go and buy out inventory just to make sure people don't. It's like a war game now, and they just want to mine all the coins because they believe in the bullish future, and they just have a lot of capital.
So what really matters is the cost of electricity as well as the temperature.
Yeah.
Because you don't want your ASICs to heat up. So I went to Tibet maybe 4 years ago, and the Chinese have built the Three Gorges Dam. So electricity is next to free, and it's cooler up there. So most of the traditional miners were up there, and they had billions of dollars of machinery running until China outlawed it recently. So a lot of them have moved to Quebec, different parts, maybe like Northern Europe. Russia, Siberia is one of the big destinations.
Mongolia.
Yep.
Iceland.
Yeah, Iceland too. Yeah.
In terms, also for private investors, I know a lot of them get scammed in terms of mining. They'll give out their computational power to a group, and I know a lot of these groups have exit scammed. So there's also a little bit of danger in that side as well. So just a heads up.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my questions is kind of like, I mean, obviously proof of work is what Bitcoin started off with, and you contribute computational power, and it's not the most efficient way to create crypto. But then you have proof of stake, and the problem with proof of stake, I mean, yes, it's much faster, with delegated proof of stake and stuff like that, but it's also highly centralized because like anything, you're gonna have a few people that accumulate a lot of coins early. And so my thing is how can with the mining process, can they create functions that make it a little more distributed, like in the early phase, like, like these bounties and these airdrops, but the reality is only a few people participate and hoard most of the coin. So like, do you find that, is there any other new type of proof of creations that are a little bit more distributed and fair, you think, that's being implemented right now?
So one of the solutions that Ethereum proposed, which a lot of protocols are currently employing, is that they split the groups up into multiple tiny groups. It's called sharding. So you have a shard here, and you have hundreds of those, and each of them is verifying certain transactions, and they're putting their money on the line. Because you're right, if someone has a lot of money, they'll automatically get most of the contracts. So the way to split that up is that you make hundreds of smaller groups, and each of them verifies transactions simultaneously. That also increases the actual scale of the protocol, where instead of one transaction per second, now you have like 100, because you have 100 different groups verifying a transaction. So sharding is one of the big ones. There are protocols which are, I don't know if you guys have heard of Cosmos or Aeon. It's a central blockchain, a central consensus mechanism with hundreds of blockchains around it, where you as a company or an individual can go and make a new blockchain with your own rules, and it has interoperability across everything else. It's like the internet of blockchains. So in that, it's proof of stake again, but they used the same protocol where the consensus mechanism is distributed and it's made more democratic. So no one with more mining power or more money can monopolize the system.
So would sharding almost be like Tango, like IOTA, how they have Tango, the Tango network? Then that's kind of like, it's kind of, I think the same thing, sharding, like jumbled around, like it's a bunch of different entities, not like
Right. And they have certain rules associated as well. So you have to take your cryptocurrency, put it at stake, and then depending on the amount of time it's been up there, you get your chance to mine a certain transaction or verify a certain transaction. What also matters is how much you've put on the line. So there's a few factors that are taken into consideration, and depending on those, the algorithm picks the next miner.
Yeah. But I would suspect that, I mean, I think proof of stake is the next generation, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be another one after that that's going to be solved. But until we get to all full proof of stake, which is the next generation, I don't think, I think there's always more incentives to potentially find a solution beyond proof of stake. But we have to get there first.
Right.
What about the whole concept of like proof of action? Like the idea that with mining, essentially saying, okay, here's the rules to the game. People participate some way, let it be your computational power or whatever. What are the next step is, something social, proof of action, proof of showing up somewhere, proof of, like ways where everyday person can kind of do things. So at the day, it's still energy. I don't know, is that ever been?
So there are currently hundreds of different consensus mechanisms being tested. One of the popular ones is proof of authority. So within a closed private blockchain, within a company, for example, one person has authority to verify transactions. It could be a general person who oversees certain transactions. Public blockchains are going to incorporate that in a way where your reputation is on the line. So there's different people trying to tackle this problem with different solutions. There are hundreds in the works, but the few that emerge will be clear in 6 to 8 months.
Take 2 more questions and then we'll do a little bit of that.
Yeah, so it seems like that shard example would probably work best for like a health environment, right? The HIM or HIPAA type application, the shards.
Actually, I can't hear, sorry.
The shard example would probably work best with a hospital application or something. Multiple hits on sort of like a centralized authority, but with probably also multiple hashes in that same type of authority. Is there anything like that?
Can you repeat the question?
Right. So from what I understand, the question is that if you have sharding and a certain group verifies a transaction, they're going to have a hash to go with that transaction. What happens to the other transactions? Is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, obviously they would be compiled.
Right. So what happens is that now you have one transaction, and that has a particular hash associated with it, and that goes into the system. At the same time, simultaneously, other people have other transactions. They're not verifying the same transaction. So each of those transactions have their own hashes.
So does anybody build a utility like that? I'm sure there's tons of them.
So a lot of protocols are actually involving that mechanism in their system now. One of the problems has been that sometimes there's a hash, two hashes are the same. That rarely ever happens. I don't think it's ever happened, but it is theoretically possible. And when that happens, then you have to have someone to step in, and it's fairly obvious that they're two separate pieces of data with the exact same hash, and then the person can just intervene and kind of scratch that transaction or do it again. But it's never happened in any blockchain tool.
Yeah.
It's like pattern recognition dropping, right? That'd be like better recognition algorithm that would cause that some kind of change.
So I think hashing is central to most algorithms at the moment. Whether it's proof of stake or proof of work, there's always hashing of some sort involved. Hashing also allows people to go down the Merkle tree and verify the transactions much faster.
Yeah.
So,
and there's no utility yet because right now we're still in the infrastructure phase. So these blockchain platforms hasn't really executed sharding. Like Ethereum sharding hasn't really been implemented yet. And maybe the one that the other blockchain platform, Zilliqa, which is a Singapore project that's been spending years on sharding. They have to get more nodes up and actually get to the main network. So they're doing that this year. So they're going to be probably one of the first few ones that tries to do sharding, and then it'll be dependent on how many nodes they can get up and running after they get to the mainnet. So I think that has to happen first, and then we'll start potentially seeing sharding implemented. Unless we see like a Telegram $2 billion ICO with infinite sharding, they claim, then that's coming in. Who knows when? How many nodes do they have? Zilliqa has only about 1,800 right now, I think, on their test net. But they'll add more as they get deployed on the main net. But still, and Ethereum's working on sharding, so we'll see how it goes.
There's a lot of crazy ideas out there. I actually heard of one where for each transaction you make an entire blockchain, and then that entire blockchain will be assigned a hash. So there's so much ideas out there, but yeah, they're right. We haven't really seen something that can be implemented fully.
That's like a whole idea turned into a new idea. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I'm actually kind of interested, maybe for the two folks on the right, to talk a little bit more about community management, especially around things like ICOs. Personally, I'm a big optimist on blockchain in the long term and a big pessimist in the short term. The general atmosphere I seem to get from various communities is that there's a huge mania, there's a lot of money to be made, everybody can get rich on all kinds of tokens. As long as it has the right utility, it can displace Airbnb or Uber or LinkedIn or anything like that. So I'm kind of interested, I guess, in how you guys manage these communities. You mentioned, it's smart to invest in a company that only has at least some kind of minimum viable product or some kind of functioning community where people are actually using these tokens. So I guess I'm kind of curious if you guys could kind of speak on how you manage those communities and how those communities are actually thriving post ICO, because the sentiment that I get is that a lot of people are just holding these tokens. Everybody wants to get rich. I'm worried that nobody's using these tokens, and then it's going to be some kind of crypto Armageddon in a year or two or something like that. So,
sure. What are the utility platforms that are actually live? Ethereum?
So yeah, most of the utility tokens that I know that are live are actually built on Ethereum. They're all ERC20.
Yeah, but these platforms are complete and functioning, and people are using their tokens, because there isn't that much out there that's actually functioning.
From my experience, a lot of them only still have their MVP up. So you're absolutely right. This is a huge problem. There's a huge problem with ICOs that actually finish their main sales and they just drop off the face of the earth.
Right.
And it's kind of my job to vet companies that aren't going to do that. The way that I fight against it is I ask myself, why does this need to be on the blockchain? And I kind of ask myself that about every single client every day. And if on one particular day I can't find an answer, then I'm already skeptical. So for example, we had somebody come and pitch us an idea about hotel chains. And their idea was that they wanted to create a blockchain and a token that can be used in every single hotel that is in their chain, which is essentially Disney dollars, you know? And so you have to ask yourself that. You have to ask yourself, why is this on the blockchain? Is this gonna, in what way is this gonna make lending? In what way is this gonna make data security? In what way is this gonna make music licensing? In what ways is it gonna make this simpler? Is it gonna make it easier? In terms of post ICO, the companies that we vet usually don't disappear off the face of the earth. We're in contact with their core team constantly. There are teams that didn't finish engagements with us, and we just stop backing those teams. And we actually, if there is something on our side where there's a problem, we make it very clear to the public, whether it's Telegram, whether it's Bitcoin Talk Forum, we say, hey, this happened, we are no longer working with this company anymore. But it's a big problem.
To follow up on that, what happens in the ICO process is that a lot of these teams will have, you look at the white paper and website, you'll see 20, 30 people on the team, some massive crazy thing. You have to just double check. A lot of those people are part-time. I've seen it many times before, or they're not even full-time. They're coming as just like a pure advisory role to help essentially be the rocket ship booster to hopefully the moon for the project. And the issue is after the ICO hype machine is done, the core team is very small, and usually they don't equip themselves enough to actually bring in somebody in-house and pay out that money. That leads a big opportunity for people like us in the growth space to come into those projects, because a lot of these core projects, they're all dev heavy, and they need to focus on development and actually getting the MVP out and use case. So user acquisition and community building isn't really there, and then that's when it falls flat, and you can just tell based on like volume and everything else too. And so when it comes to building community, what the good tokens that are doing it right is they're keeping constant updates out. Like Cardano gives people updates every week.
Weekly transparency.
Yeah, weekly
updates.
transparency, live streams, partnership announcements, just constant activity in events and roadshows, and even more just constant thought leadership too. And so those are like the good tokens that are out there. You'll see that, but a lot of them, it's some of them is intentional that they fall flat. Some is unintentional just because, again, they lost the whole team essentially after the ICO, and it's only the core team of devs left. And then some are just complete losers and scams, and they're just gonna fade. They're just gonna slowly fade out in the darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said several really interesting things, and I want to try and address some of them. One, there's advisors out there that are literally just like spray and pray their face all over all the ICOs in exchange for some X percentage of tokens, and then hopefully a couple of them hit. So do not believe advisory boards. And there's other ICOs that will literally just use people's names and faces without their permission as well. There's a lot of that happening. So just if you are investing and an advisory board is a big factor in that, just really, really vet that. How many other advisory boards is this person on, and is there what kind of relationship, what kind of role are they really playing? The other thing is, gosh, we just don't have enough blockchain engineers. We just need more blockchain engineers. Something that we're trying to build out at DNA is a funnel and kind of a team so we're very close with EOS. We ran their ICO and they're part of our family. And so we want to encourage people to build on EOS, but there are not enough people who understand how to code on EOS. And so how do you encourage people to build on something where there isn't a pool of talent for it, right? And this goes for all the blockchains. So not only do you now have to launch a blockchain, you also have to go and literally build a pool of talent. So we have EOS meetups every Wednesday in LA, and we're recruiting people from around the world, and we're trying to create a built-in pool of talent. That's the second thing. The third thing I wanted to say is community building is really important. The thought that I'd started and not finished was there's actually a lot of these utility tokens, most of them don't have platforms that they have utility on. The whole point of building community is that you have users buying your tokens, and then they are deriving that utility, and they're continuing to be excited about the project, right? So similar as a normal app will have like also a Twitter following and an Instagram following and this and that. Like think of a Telegram the same way. It's just a way to continue to engage your community to come back to your product and use it. Fortunately, the products aren't being built fast enough, right? And a lot of the interest dies off, and then maybe the product dies as well, right? So my hope is what we end up seeing ICOs with betas ready. And then when they launch their token, they can use it on something right away. And that community goes towards something, and it goes towards building the usership on the platform.
Hey, well, thank you all for being here. And thank you, Justin, Shaan, Jay, and Tatiana for so graciously answering all the questions. Hopefully some of you can be here for the next 15, 20 minutes or so, so we could do a little bit of networking, and if some people want to come over and talk to them individually, we could do that. But before that, before we close off, there was a raffle involved. So I'm going to ask the lovely lady Juliet, who gave us the blockchain definition, to pick. Okay. All right.
All right. It is. I'm pretty loud. I don't know. I can take it if you want. You take it. The number is 1494583. Did you got it? Congratulations! Come on down. You have won.
A Bitcoin should have been the prize, but didn't get on. Oh, come on up, Greg. Okay. Well, we just have a little gift card for you, but thank you. Yeah, you can go home and try to exchange it for a Bitcoin. All right. Thank you all for being here, and let's get some more drinks and possibly more pizza too, and have a chat with all of us over here. Okay, thank you guys.